it's a mess. So why don't we learn about the technology? Because that is also horrifying.
Yeah, less
And real.
horrifying, but horrifying.
Yeah.
So in my section today, I'll be unpacking a few ethical dilemmas surrounding the use of technology and the way that we see it like represented in the Possessor. Currently, we are not equipped with the kind of technology necessary to create this dystopian scenario, at least not at the level that we see it in the film, as far as we know. But there are technological advances in the works that could enable this kind of future, if not regulated or monitored. And I think because like most of Congress is like 70 plus years old, it's not going to get regulated or monitored. Like they don't understand. The internet and everything that it is and all the technology surrounding it has like developed so exponentially since their understanding of what that, like they're just so disconnected that like I do not see this getting regulated or monitored in the way that it will need to, because we don't have the governmental structure in place to initiate that monitoring.
Like the wherewithal to know that it needs to be done.
Yeah. And
what needs to be done.
And like even some of the discussions I've seen around like Amazon and like buying certain companies and whatnot, it's like, the ethical concerns are like raised, but it's mostly about market competition is like the reason they're like, don't do that. And it's like, capitalism. It should be more than that. It should be way more than that. Hands. That is one of the reasons. Absolutely. But like, sure, it should be way more about the ethical concerns about what people will do with that kind of information and how it will be used to monitor people, and like in an Orwellian nightmare against us, like the surveillance and control that goes into that. And it's like the ones that were mad about it, I think it was like London, and that's like one of the most heavily surveilled countries or cities in a country. So like it's a time. So I don't think it will be regulated or monitored in the way that we need, just like how we're seeing like AI develop and everything else. So I think considering the documented history of how corporations, the CIA, the government in the past have experimented and attempted to control people as well, it is within reason to be very concerned about how they would operate if this kind of technology were achievable. Games have hinted to this in many terrifying ways as well, in how technology and our biology could be altered and integrated, as well as manipulated by those in power, thinking like Cyberpunk, Metal Gear, many others. As well as
there's like also Orwell.
Yeah, Orwell. The game
We've done an episode about surveillance.
Yeah.
Check it out.
I'm trying to think of like, there's like other ones too. Like there's so many games that have come out in recent years or like are very old, and we're talking about this way ahead of where we are now. So I'll be unpacking 2 technology use cases and the ethical concerns surrounding both. We'll get a little bit into Neuralink and like brain chips, and then we'll get into a little bit of data mining and like our information being sold to companies and also being used against us by police and other things. So that's so fun. But still, the least scary part of the film. So to provide some context, Neuralink is a company that Elon Musk owns, and we know who he is. There's a few articles that I got from, but I found a YouTube video that was really interesting from about that. It's called Neuralink Brain Chips First Human Patient. How does it work? And it's a trip, honestly. So they go into like kind of unpacking the intent or claimed intent about what's being developed and how we've seen it represented thus far and how it's continued to grow. So essentially Neuralink, the chips that can go in our brains, have successfully been implanted in a human as of now. Like it's recent, it happened. They're apparently recovering well. We don't know anything about them really. We don't know their names or like how well they're doing or what that even means in the context. But Elon Musk tweeted that they're doing fine, so let's trust him. So in this video, they claim that the goal of Musk and the Neuralink project is to merge the human mind with AI. There's like speeches where Musk talks about this, where he said, where AI is inevitable, the only way we're going to compete is if we make ourselves like machines.
Well, we did this. We did the digital apocalypse.
Yeah.
We cover that too.
So yeah, so it presents a lot of potential if in the right hands and a lot of threats if in the wrong hands. So this technology in theory would have the capability to alter the way neurons interact within the brain and the signals that allow us to move, think, and more. The goal was essentially to merge the human brain with technology, which could either deliver life-changing results in a positive or deeply negative way. A piece of the chip's intent is to decode and understand neural spikes, basically the signals in our brain, and translate what information comes from that into something readable to give us a more clear picture of the way the human brain operates. There are ways that this could be kind of like Black Mirror, Futurama horror scenario, and also possibly provide a future where this Cronenbergian type of hijacking, at the very least, cyberpunk. But what we see in the video
is
that
TikTok to you.
Yeah. I'm hacking their brains. What we see in the video is that the neuron spikes are tracked and decoded to make sense of what the signals mean. So they essentially implanted, in the video, they show like a monkey that a macabre, or I think is what the monkey is called, and they implanted 2 chips into their brain, and we watch them play a game on a computer screen. And at first, you think they're using the joystick to do that, but then it's later revealed that the joystick is unplugged, and the monkey is controlling the game with its brain. It's playing Pong with its brain.
Okay.
And that essentially they've done this through tracking the signal while using the joystick to translate that code and what that looks like in the brain to send the signal to the game without the joystick.
I get that.
The same movement, essentially. So it's like tracking.
Yeah, like this equals this. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like using those signals after decoded to send that signal to the technology and connect the 2 together. So you think I want the little lever to go here, it goes there because the program has been trained to respond in that way.
Yeah. When brain makes this sound, it means go up.
Yeah, and what was convenient and interesting is that they did not mention that I believe there were instances where the monkeys died during the care.
Probably.
And during the experiment. I'll double check that. I might have to redact that later, but I'm pretty sure that did happen. I remember hearing about it, so hopefully that's real. Well, not hopefully, that's sad, but you get what I'm saying.
Hopefully for facts.
For facts, that is real. So apparently, essentially, they've developed it enough where they can decode at least the basic movements to understand the way that this could connect our brains to technology. And essentially the goal would be to, through understanding this coded technology and the signals that are there, to be able to translate that into ways that we could use tech to move things or send an email or operate in a job or even like control prosthetics and other things. So that, as I said, there's ways that this could be used like to be very life-changing in a good way, but because of who's creating it, it's likely that that's not actually where it's going to land at the end of the day. So the video goes on to claim, and Musk himself claims, that they're seeking out patients who have amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, formerly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And illnesses and injuries that cause paralysis, essentially, to test the capabilities of whether or not the neural link can restore the connections between the signals sent by the brain and its pathway to limbs and other areas of the body. Additionally, using the connection to technology, prosthetics, and other tools that the brain could activate and control. This could extend out to being able to replay memories down the line too. It's been alluded to that they could play your memories, decode those, and you'll be able to watch those back. Offer
That's a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, it's that's something that I think is a major ethical concern. I understand it from the perspective of like I don't have a horrible memory. I would love to know what I was doing when I was 5. Sure.
Yeah.
But do I want the government to know what I was doing when I was
No.
5? Probably not. And I like the way that this could be manipulated to like be shown in trial. Like everyone would know if someone murdered somebody.
To find people and where they were.
Exactly. Like there's so many ways that this could be used and ways that this could be like translated into something messed up. So
thought crimes.
Yes, predicting murder through thought crime or like anything else, just predicting crime in general.
Yeah.
I thought about stealing eyeliner, so arrest me because I might, like stuff like that.
Pre-murder, like
There's so much media that already like kind of covers this. So it's essentially they're like, we watched that and we're like, let's do it. Let's just see, A show I want to like shout out is Upload, that's on the Evil Prime, and it's all about like digital afterlife and uploading your consciousness into an afterlife, and it's about like capitalism and how that would like translate, like you can be put in low data mode and like you're just frozen for months at a time if your family won't pay for your afterlife subscription. So it's the whole thing. So essentially, and then like the goal is that eventually you can re-upload your body into a living person. So it's a temporary.
One day we'll do altered carbon.
So it's all a whole thing. But it's essentially that this technology is being created and could eventually lead to these outcomes. It's being offered and talked about as if these are the eventual outcomes that will take place. So you can watch videos in your mind, send an email, thought-based connections to the internet. It makes genuinely joining the simulation. It would change VR. Like striking vipers, you could go striking vipers immediately. Like it would just be like everything would actually be happening in your brain, and that would be a part of the situation. So this kind of technology, as I said, could be really amazing if we did not live in a capitalistic and oppressive society. If there was any trust for those in power to not manipulate and distort this power, I think this would be an amazing tool. I'd be like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Holding my breath.
Wow, what this can do to change people's lives in a positive way. But we don't live in that society. The if isn't there. So it's very likely, unfortunately, that this will be manipulated as a method of control, as a method of like putting advertisements into our brains and other like really gross, uncomfortable things, a cyberpunk kind of future.
The new Jim Crow.
Yeah. So considering who's in charge of developing the technology, and I mean, there are other companies, but it's like, who's funding them? I do not believe that this will stay what it is claimed to be made for. I think they're using that as a way to get people to think it's a good idea, to validate it, as you said, Gabe. And they're not going to use it for that, unfortunately, because of the world that we live in. So there's also articles that kind of go through the ethical implications of brain chips, specifically the 20th WCP ethical assessment of implantable brain chips, goes through the beneficial applications, the ethical and social concerns, cost and accessibility, and its use for control and surveillance, and the lack of regulation and policy, or rather the need for it, and the fact that we don't currently have that in place. So they kind of go through it would be amazing if these chips were able to help people enhance their sensory perception, memory, cognitive abilities, as well as help people like use prosthetics and other things to be able to like get through the world in a different way. So, and it could also enable invisible communication and provide consistent access to information. All of those things super beneficial and interesting. But the ethical and social concerns are essentially safety issues. We don't know what these chips will do to our brains. We don't know what the radiation from the technology in our brain will do, as well as informed consent, privacy concerns, and potential genuinely for social inequities, because there's going to be a price point to access, as well as like the psychological impacts of altering and merging the human brain with technology. Additionally, cost and accessibility is an issue. Essentially, the text acknowledges potential cost effectiveness of the implantable brain chips and discusses the stages of adoption from therapeutic use to enhancement. And it raises concerns that this technology would be accessible, that there would be a large socioeconomic gap between classes, and then also like just the ways in which, like, even if there's access to life-saving care, like we see today with the pharmaceutical industry and everything else, that like they can make medicine, but they're not going to give it to the people who need it. They're going to charge them hundreds and thousands of dollars to gain access to the thing to save or help or improve their lives. Because they don't care about people. They care about money, ultimately. They also warn about the potential for totalitarian control and government surveillance facilitated by implantable brain chips. It discusses the implications of individual autonomy, privacy, and security, particularly in military and criminal justice contexts, as well as like the remote capability to just like end somebody. It's Bluetooth compatible. You can Bluetooth someone out of existence with that. You could just send signals to blow it up inside their brain, which will kill them. Like, you know, like I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but like, it's possible.
We could I say let the rich people submersible their brains.
Yeah, sure. That's fair.
Let the rich people go in their tiny little submersible and
the unfortunate reality of it is that the pathway to them getting there is on the death and hurt of marginalized people that they're experimenting on through, like, as they're volunteering for the study. And especially because they're calling for people with disabilities. Like, if anything goes wrong, the pathway for Elon Musk to have this brain chip and be safe and go do whatever he wants to do in his submersible brain time comes at the cost of potentially a lot of like innocent people. But yeah. And also the passage emphasizes the need for comprehensive evaluation and regulation and calls like essentially for people to like look at these ethical concerns and not do it just for the money, like really question, like, should we do this? Why are we doing this? Who is the one doing it? Media analysis, the situation of what's happening and why. And essentially, like, we just don't know the long-term impact of this. And there was an experiment done specifically in another study. So researchers grapple with the ethics of testing brain implants from Science AAAS. And in this, they talk about neurologist Helen Mayberg, who initiated a trial in 2003 to test DBS, which is a kind of treatment for severe depression, by implanting electrodes in area 25 of the brain. The trial was sponsored by St. Jude Medical, involved a 200-person clinical trial. The trial failed. It didn't show like a significant change, but 90%, specifically 90 participants failed to show a significant improvement between the active stimulation group and the control group. And essentially, despite its failure, some participants chose to keep their implants, essentially. And the ethical dilemma is that now they're financially responsible for maintaining those implants. Because they did the study, they've been implanted with these had brain surgery to put these in their head. And now the people who put them in their head essentially are saying, like, that sucks. If you want to keep them, you can, but you have to pay for their maintenance. If anything goes wrong, you have to pay to fix it. We put these in you, but you're choosing to keep them. And if anything goes wrong, that sucks. So there's just like a lot of very reasonable concerns around that. And like the person who conducted the study is very conflicted on it and is like having a whole time. Essentially just like, what do we do when we're creating these kinds of studies? There has to be considerations on long-term implications of the participants and making sure that they're cared for afterwards. Because in that study, it didn't seem like that's what took place. So essentially, like, even the researchers who are developing this technology are grappling with the ethical dilemmas and like the fact that like we do live in a capitalistic society that's not going to pay for the medical care of the participants of the studies that are taking place. And then the last thing that we'll be unpacking is data mining. So I didn't know what it was very genuinely. So I looked up, what is data mining? A Beginner's Guide 2022. And they say data mining is the most commonly defined as the process of using computers and automation to search large sets of data for patterns and trends, turning these findings into business insights and predictions. Data mining goes beyond the search process and uses data to evaluate future probabilities and develop actionable analysis. It's essentially companies track data and try to predict consumer behaviors, as well as like in social media, similarly, like the algorithm. It's people predicting what's going to do well based on tracking and collecting and buying user data to make those kind of predictions. Amazon is a big proponent of that. Amazon's empire there's an article called Amazon's Empire of Surveillance. Through recent billion-dollar acquisitions of healthcare services and smart home devices, the tech giant is leveraging its monopoly power to track every aspect of our lives. And the article,
because they are making their own health insurance.
Yep.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah. So the article highlights how Amazon gathers data from various sources, including its retail site, Prime Video, Goodreads, Audible, Twitch, and Whole Foods. So concerns are raised about the potential misuse of this data for targeted advertising and surveillance purposes. So they're saying they're looking at curtains, and they're really looking at everyone having sex. Like that's what this is. It's like the movie you talked about. So specific examples are provided in the article, specifically the use of Ring doorbell lights, cameras, sharing recordings with law enforcement, and Echo devices allegedly collecting data without user consent. There has been documented evidence of this. And the recent acquisitions of One Medical, specifically like a medical insurance-based thing, further expands Amazon's access to consumer data, raising concerns about healthcare. They also had a deal with iRobot, which is like the little vacuums, little Roombas, that fell through, but the concern there was the risk of home mapping, which, fun fact, they already do with our Wi-Fi routers. So while the iRobot would definitely also help with that, and they would give more people access to that information, unfortunately, Wi-Fi routers already do data mapping because they've trained AI to be able to tell where people are based on where your Wi-Fi router is. I sound like a conspiracy theorist.
And your Echo, like in all of those things, when they hear your voice, they can map where you are. Like they use like echolocation.
Yeah. So it's like a whole thing. They are tracking the heck out of us. That's why I like stopped using my like Google Home. Or like little like speakers, because it freaks me out. So essentially, this is not something exclusive to Amazon, but Amazon specifically markets itself as like an online marketplace, but is a surveillance agency. Like they don't talk about it enough. They are 100% a surveillance first agency, and then they also sell you stuff. Critics are,
they sell you the stuff you want, maybe,
because.
How did they know?
Yeah. When you like say into the phone, like rings, like your person goes away and you're like, oh, I want this. I'll give them ads for it. So that's what Amazon is essentially in essence collecting, as well as like social media platforms and whatever. So critics argue that Amazon's market dominance and data collection practices contribute to antitrust concerns and threaten consumer privacy. The article mentions ongoing legislative efforts to address these issues, including proposed antitrust bills aimed at restraining dominant digital platforms like Amazon. We do not know if they're going to go through. In an article, they quote someone named Greer saying, people tend to think of Amazon as an online marketplace, but really Amazon is a surveillance company. Every aspect of their profit is derived from their ability to amass and leverage data. Amazon's surveillance of its employees is well documented as well, from its time off task metric that measures productivity to monitoring its delivery drivers with AI cameras. Such strict standards that employees report being scared to take bathroom breaks lest they fall behind, drivers and warehouse workers have reported.
That's when they were like peeing in bottles and stuff.
Yeah, and like just like the union busting and all that stuff too. Like it all kind of connects. The level of surveillance is like pretty terrifying in like the way that it's used to isolate us, as you're kind of like discussing, Gabe. So there's obviously ethical concerns around data mining. I found an article about the ethics of data mining, and there are 3 chief concerns that they list, specifically transparency. Customers should have a certain amount of visibility into and control over how their data is collected and used. a lot of this stuff is like not told to people outright. So you have to like seek out how to like turn off the tracking stuff. And like also like the terms and conditions being in like tiny fonts that are like 18 pages long. It's like it's intentionally made that way so that you don't know what you're signing up for. So it's a very clear lack of transparency that currently exists within the data mining space. Essentially, companies should be forthcoming with their data collection and use practices and ask permission before acting rather than ask forgiveness after the fact. However, transparency with opt-in or opt-out procedures is not sufficient. Customers should be presented with and asked to explicitly consent to specific language around data access and usage in order to make informed choices, but that's not given, essentially. The other concern is personal data. Currently, there is no industry or political standard in the US regarding the legal parameters or definition of personal data. Today, businesses operate largely with sector-specific regulations and their own beliefs about what constitutes personal data. Often, these ideas center around legal consent rather than types of data and how companies can or cannot use them. The latter two presents risks to customers. And then governance, especially, they said, even in the EU, where the GDPR offers a more comprehensive legal framework for data practices, control within companies is just as essential as protecting consumer data. There must be leaders assigned to policy development, supervision, and enforcement. Without proper governance and like regulation, ethical lapses and legal troubles are inevitable. So essentially, with the system that we currently have in place, there's just so many openings for breaches, as well as just like lack of care actually for like the human lives that are impacted by these things, and a prioritization of profits and access to our money.
Yeah, lots of scary things, especially with the questions of ethics, because it's like they're not going to ask those things, and the right people aren't going to ask the people who are in charge. No one cares.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of it's like asking for forgiveness, not permission, is something that those companies use often. They're gonna do whatever they want until they get caught, and then they'll be like, "Oh, geez, then we'll accept the consequences." But luckily, we made billions of dollars, and now I can flee to an island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess when you're thinking of the ways that that technology has been practiced on, tested on, minorities, lower income folks, vulnerable communities, then it is, again, giving more credit to the film than it probably deserves. A good representation to start a film in which you are abusing and using human bodies as tools to start it with a Black woman.
Yeah.
Again, to more credit than I think
that it actually
deserves. But there is something to say there. And unfortunately, right, is the truth. It's always just like, nothing about us without us. And they weren't there. So they were not part of this team, I promise.
Yeah.
They didn't show up anywhere else. There's no other Black people.
Nope.
Cool. So
yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah, I that if you pocket it, if you say, yeah, okay, this is the truth of that, and then you pocket it, it's a decent film.
Yeah,
like genuinely, I enjoyed myself when I could temporarily suspend that rant and watch the film. I think that part was it. Like, I think it was an interesting film, and they brought to life some horrors that I didn't even really think about. Right?
Yeah.
It's just par for the course of horror.
Yeah. And I think it's fair if you don't want to see that. And the film, whatever it was trying to say, it was not worth the cost that it did at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to watch it, that's okay. And that's fair.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And if you're going to do that, just do it. Which I'm thinking, because for people, if you're listening and not watching, if you go watch, I Am Trying to Be the Tasia, who has very white hair, blonde white hair, and then like very light eyebrows, and Kat made a joke that kind of looked like Ariana Grande. So it's just like, yes, and say that shit with your chest.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they should say that to your chest. If you're gonna say it,
Yeah.
own it, dude. Say it then.
Do it intentionally and thoughtfully. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, we got one more episode left of our New Year, New Me series. It definitely, has my brain turning, thinking about terrifying technology and all the different things that we have yet to cover, including altered carbon, and eventually, like, even talking about. We potentially were going to cover Maniac, which was about clinical trials. There's even just some Doctor Who episodes I've seen as of late that is like, oh, what a great employee you would be if you didn't have to sleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh, capitalism strikes again.
There are so many pieces of media that would just be really interesting to unpack. Even the games. There's so many games I've played recently, that are just so spot on when it comes to that. Like, I've been replaying Metal Gear, and that is the whole series is like, government do messed up thing, make people mutilate people and make them into super soldiers and stuff, and then also destroy vulnerable populations in the process. So
yeah. So if you want to hear us do a terrifying technology series in the future, maybe this year, let us know. Let us know some of your horrifying technology films, books, video games, TV shows, whatever. And we will see about putting them on the list of something to potentially cover. We have, like I said, one more episode for this series. Then we're moving on to something else before our, biannual big break. So don't get married.
Don't eat your kids.
Yeah. Or you don't need your kids. You'll be a better worker if you didn't have to care about them.
Yeah, go do a job. That's what
they
want.
Job.
Ultimately.
That's what they want you to do. That's why they're like, oh, you work all the time. You never are not working.
Can't have an opinion if work always.
Yeah. We invented the light bulb so you didn't have to go home when it got dark.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.